Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. Police Chief John Toome has been police chief for just over a year, and City Councilor Kurt Sale has invited Chief Toome to join us for Inside Town Hall this month, and we are going to talk about all of the things that are facing law enforcement. Welcome. You haven't been here for quite a while.
No, it's been duly noted that I've not been featured on this show yet. So I could cross that off my list of media things that I haven't done yet. So thanks for having me. Again, happy to be here, and I'm sure we have a lot of material we can cover in the time. So
I think your job's been pretty simple over the last year.
Pretty simple, not much going on, you know, and it's just kind of an interesting time because people have kind of asked, well, how's your first year gone, you know, and I think if we would rewind a year, you know, you'd kind of hope for maybe an uneventful first year. It's been anything but in many ways that's just showed the strength of the team, showed the strength of who we have as a city, who we employ, but also given us just an operational tempo and experience that you may take a lifetime of a career to get. Well, we've kind of packed that into a year, you know. So again, there's some positive outlooks too as we deal with some of these challenges that just makes us better for the future. Councilor
Sale, let's talk a little bit about the police department and you know why you think it's important to bring on the chief to visit about. Well, we have a vast array of topics today to talk about.
Oh, we certainly do, and I will tell you, as a council that's just been reelected, and this council and the council before, and all that I've had to deal with. We're huge supporters of our police department. Chief Toome and I met with some other councilors. It was this week. It seems like it was forever ago, to talk about what more can the council do. What else can we provide for them that they're not currently getting? And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have him here. As much as the police and crime and other things have been in the news, it's great to have him do that. Now, we will fully fund the requests for the police department, and we might even go a little step more in our budgets in the next few weeks. So along with that, we could talk about neighborhood watch, we could talk coffee with a cop, we could talk all that. I'm going to let him talk about the specifics of his department, but just so the public knows, the city administration and the city council, very supportive of our police department, one of the best in the country. And the selection process that the mayor and administration, the council went through to select Chief Toome was exhausting. Comparatively, I've been around for 42 years in Sioux Falls, that we put him through the ringer to do that, and I know we picked the right guy. Yeah. So I'll let him talk about the specifics of his department.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, give us an overview of the Sioux Falls Police Department.
Sure. So right now we are authorized 284 officers. I think sometimes that people don't realize that. They either overshoot or undershoot because they just don't have an idea of how the police work fits together. We currently have 277 officers that we have hired, so we're 7 short. And we have, of that 277, about 20 that are in some stage of training. You know, there's about 10 that are in field training, 10 that are in academy type training. And so we're kind of, you know, we're the biggest organization in the state when it comes to law enforcement, and there's kind of just always at the top, a little bit of movement depending on retirements and people who don't make it and different things like that. It's just kind of worth noting when we select people, our selections are very, very well vetted, some of the most rigorous in the region. And even going through all those selections, you know, we don't just we're not just chasing a number, we're making sure we get the right people. But even with those standards, I'm gonna just think about other agencies around our region that I know that are 20 plus down, right? Or even close to 10% down on their staffing. So I look at us being 7 down. Am I happy about that? No, right? But in the situation that law enforcement's in kind of nationwide, where there's a depressed supply right now of people who are willing to get into this line of work, we're in a good position. And a lot of that is the support of the city council and the support of the mayor. And there's no question that this community supports its law enforcement. And I think that's something that in 2020, we saw that pendulum swing with the whole defund the police movement. Mm-hmm. Sioux Falls didn't bite on that, right? Instead, they doubled down with the public safety training campus, more investments in material and equipment and people, and we're seeing that now as the rest of the nation kind of walks back some of that, right? They're like, well, maybe that wasn't the move. Well, we're in a position where we never made that move, and so I think it's good to know. But again, we're growing every year as the community grows, and we have a lot that's on our plates, and we kind of know that. So,
give us a little bit of your background. You know, like Councilor Sale said, that they put you through the ringer to figure
Sure.
out if you were the guy. What's your background and why are you the guy?
Sure. So I grew up in Sioux Falls, grew up in All Saints neighborhood in Pettigrew Heights, went to Longfellow, Lowell, Axtell Park, Lincoln, University of Sioux Falls. I'm a central Sioux Falls kid, my whole life, and got out of college with we could just fill up a whole show with me telling my story, but I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. I had a business degree, wanted to give sales a try. There's a certain stability Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So I kind of forced myself to work sales for a couple years. About halfway through the process, both my wife and I realized that wasn't maybe the career path for me, that I needed to go where I was led, which is a career in law enforcement. So I transitioned in 2005, got hired by the police department. It was my dream job at the time. I couldn't imagine a place I'd rather want to work than the Sioux Falls Police Department, and quickly realized I could go and do anything within this department, even more than I thought. Well, never intended to be the chief, worked as a patrol officer. After being a patrol officer for a while, I got selected for the SWAT team, and that kind of became my niche within the department, but also was involved in a lot of training components in different aspects. Eventually was a department training officer, became a patrol sergeant, and then a lieutenant, and then in 2021, when Chief Burns retired, decided that my path had kind of led that direction, and I'd put my name into the hat for this position. And here's where I think it's important people understand about the Sioux Falls Police Department. You see a lot of departments around the country who will grab an outside chief or an outside person to be chief. Central to our culture, as soon as I arrived at the police department, was that you are always training your replacement. It doesn't matter what position you're at in the line, you better have somebody underneath you who's ready to take your spot. And so for us culturally, as we develop our people and move them up, and this started several chiefs ago, from Barthel to Burns and so on, the emphasis down the line is who's going to take your spot. And I think Chief Burns did a great job before he left of saying, here's the candidates from within who can take this spot, and they're people some who grew up in the city but grew up in the department and know the community, and you just can't always get that from an outside person that comes in. And I think that's where some of the discussion kind of comes. So now it's our job, right? Just as like when I moved on from my position, there was 2 people to fill my spot as lieutenant, and now we always are looking towards the future about who the next person up, because none of us are irreplaceable, right? Like we can all always have that, and that's kind of central to our culture, and something I want the people of Sioux Falls to know, just kind of how we operate and how we think from that level.
From the city council's perspective, he has to deal with everything across the board, whether it's crime in Sioux Falls, and it's politics, it's public relations, it's marketing, it's everything. How does the city council help in that support of this role? Because it's not just law enforcement by itself.
Right, and I will say this: last year, the amount of phone calls and contacts I have from citizens that talk about crime has increased. So it's probably about 50% of the client or citizen contact that I get that talk about crime. So the engagement that we get to have with Chief Toom, he's always been able to take a meeting with us. Sometimes we have to schedule a little bit out because he's busy and we're busy, but he's always there for us to have those discussions, as are the other city department heads. They're very open to the council to talk about things and talk about planning. So the council, the way we've kind of learned to operate a little bit is we kind of operate as a very loose team. So if somebody's kind of leading the charge on just like Greg Neitzer just did on bees for the college campuses, we all kind of let Greg lead that charge, and he keeps us informed on what he's doing. When it comes to the police department, we all kind of have a little bit of a niche that we'd like to talk to the chief about. Been very open for us about that. And as we continue to look at solutions for the issues that we have today, it's nice to have the 8 different city councils from 8 different walks of life being able to contribute to that. So if we come up with an idea, Chief Toom will listen to it. Sometimes he tells me that, now that's not going to work, and I get that a lot on a lot of different things, but at least we're trying to be innovative to go forward.
Sure. So, I know there's a survey that goes out that, and I don't know if it's every year or every other year, that the city does with citizens to find out, what is their main concern or priorities for the city. And a lot of times crime comes up. Can you talk about, are people concerned mostly about crime, or is it standard of living or streets are always up there.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because we're in the middle right now of redoing that. So it's been 2 years since we've had that. And there's never been an overwhelmingly one issue that's been the hot. It depends on who you are. Streets are always there. You're right. Traffic is always up there. Crime is always up there. Crime tends to, the citizens' response to crime tends to ebb and flow depending on what they see in the news more recently. So if there's been a lot of shootings in the news, then if that poll comes out, that survey comes out, right after that we see that spike up a little bit. But actually I have a meeting on Tuesday, I think it's Tuesday, to talk about the next generation of that polling, which we'll do hopefully sometime at the end of this year.
Sure, so let's get back to you about, what are you hearing on the streets from people?
Well, I'm going to back up because it's kind of the same question as actually you just asked here. But so as chief, I've made myself available to talk to about anybody and everybody within the first year. If there's a community group or anything that wants to invite me, I'll go and I'll speak. And depending on where I go and who I talk to, the concerns are very, very different. For some people in town, the number one concern is speeding. Right? It is the number one concern, right? For others, it's much, much different. And I think that's where we kind of look at the city itself, and we look at the different parts of town, and the concerns of the people who reside in those different parts are sometimes very, very different. So it requires us to listen to what's going on in the community. At the same time, for the community, they'll hear a lot of events and just apply it to the whole city, right? And it's okay, well, this is here and this is here. So a lot of us is just kind of communicating with them, okay, well, what's your concern? What's your issue at this moment? But again, the number one concern I hear the most about when I go out and talk to the public is speeding. Now for us, there's obviously some other concerns out there, especially when it comes to youth violence, kind of some of the recidivism facts we see, the people who are involved in criminal activity. We have a lot of different things that we're trying to look at, and also looking at as we talk, as we collaborate with the city council, with the mayor's office, and with the community. Well, what are some approaches to bring some real change? Because I think law enforcement, sometimes we can do a lot, but we can't kind of do the whole mission, right? It takes everybody to get the whole mission accomplished.
Okay. Well, when we come back, we have a ton of things to talk about, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about crime and the homeless task force. So we'll be back in just a moment.
The City of Sioux Falls has an easy way for you to help your community. Simply download the City of Sioux Falls mobile app. The app can be used to ask a question or to report a variety of nuisances like potholes, graffiti, streetlights not working, abandoned vehicles, and more. You can even upload a photo with your report. Every report is immediately routed to the appropriate team so they can quickly respond. In addition to tracking your reports, the app allows you to view reports submitted by other users and learn when they've been resolved. Go to the App Store or Google Play stores and download the City of Sioux Falls app today.
Welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are visiting with City Councilor Kurt Sale and his guest, Police Chief John Toom, and we have lots to talk about. Let's talk about the crime trends and what you're seeing. What has people most concerned at this moment?
And so if we looked at when I became chief a year ago, we kind of did the crime update for 2021. And when we did the stats for 2021, we saw nationwide levels increasing across the country, where in Sioux Falls we saw levels decrease almost across the board, especially when it came to violent crime. Well, what we've seen in 22 is that kind of shift. And here's the thing, sometimes for Sioux Falls, we're a year behind on economic trends. We've seen where recessions hit us a little bit later. Sometimes we're a year behind on national crime trends. And we've even seen in the past where drugs that are affecting other areas are a little late to get here. So now we've kind of seen some crime move up this year as far as some of the assaults and different things we've seen. But one thing that's remained true within that, and we've said it before on public forums, is that Sioux Falls still has a history of where random violence is not something we see a lot of. I often say a lot of the violence we see is amongst people sometimes love, the domestic issues that drive through there, and then also with the narcotics trade and just criminal activity, some of the violence exists in that realm too. And so what I pay attention to very closely is the numbers within the numbers, right? So what are we seeing in the way of random violent crime towards other people? And that's something I always want to pay attention to and take special note of. Now again, we're a community of 200,000+ people. What people forget though is our metro area is 250+. Everybody comes to Sioux Falls to live, work, shop, play. Well, they come here to do other things too, right? And we got to be on top of that and be really on the front edge of that. So that's kind of what we're going to see in the next couple months. We're going to sit down and kind of get into the numbers a little bit, but also talk about some broader social issues and other things that we're seeing as far as recidivism, just how our system is working, but how and isn't working. But also, really, when we look at corrections, we look at courts. What are we doing to prepare people to be successful once they're released from prison? Because that's a big conversation. Because I can tell you, as law enforcement, we're still making the arrests, right? But a lot of people we're seeing involved, especially in these violent crimes, we've already arrested a couple times, right? So what are we doing to break that cycle once they're in it, or to keep youth in particular from never getting into that cycle? And that's where you see some of the investments for us as law enforcement in Camp Postcard through the VOA. We're really pushing mentorship. There's LSS, Sioux 52, VOA, a lot of different mentorship options out there. That's what you're going to hear from us a lot in the next coming months.
So you're saying that most crime is between people who are known to one another.
And I can't say like most, but that's really a big trend. And I think sometimes we look at especially on the domestic component, right? Mm-hmm. Or the people that we associate with, or the people that we drink or do drugs with, right? Sometimes we see a lot of that crime kind of in that circle. Now there's other crime that happens too. I'm not saying this is the only type of crime that happens, but I say it's important to look at the numbers within the numbers, and really we try to paint the really broad brush and say, well, this is happening here, right? Or across the city, crime wave. Well, let's look into it, like really what the numbers are telling us, and we'll do some more analysis with that. And again, my concern as chief is really, we see these crime numbers and we see some people getting arrested, especially for violent crimes, and we've already seen them. And I'll pull up their sheet and I'll see repeated incidents that they've been involved in, and we've arrested them, and we've done different things. Well, it's a system-wide thing. I always say law enforcement, police in particular, are the front door to the system. Right? Sometimes we're the atrium, if you want to get even broader into that. There's a lot more stuff that happens as people move through that building, through corrections, through courts, through what the judges have to say, and then ultimately how the community invests back into that. And so again, you'll hear more from us in the coming months, because this is something that we're keenly aware of, from the mayor, from the council on down, speaking to our counterparts in Rapid City on the mayoral level and the sheriff's department and police level. We're seeing similar trends, and we want to be able to kind of unify what we're doing, look at approaches, and how can we really address these in the best way possible.
We have seen, recently in the news, and let's remember that this show airs for about 4 weeks, so recent is relative, where people are approaching children on the playgrounds in our schools, and these kind of incidences is really what scares people.
Yes.
What do we do as citizens if we see something that looks not right?
And so I always say, and it comes back to, if you see something, say something. So a couple incidents we've had recently where people have really sounded the alarm because something didn't seem right, and I think that gives us the opportunity to get involved early, and we've made a couple arrests, so we've been able to do investigations quickly. The sooner we get the information, the sooner we can get on that path. And we work very well with the school district, especially being on the proactive edge of things. I know sometimes as parents, it's just not fast enough, right? You want information now, and you want it as soon as it happens. And the reality is that's possible sometimes. Other times it takes a little bit to put that together. So we understand the concerns of parents, which is why before the school year started, we had open communications with the Sioux Falls School District, because a lot of the topic of conversation since late May, June was the Uvalde incident and the incident that came after it, right? And so we, as the police department, pay close attention to incidents like that around the country. We are constantly students of the game, looking at what's happening and really testing our practices against what we see out there to make sure we're always industry best practices and standards. And one thing that's impressed me since I came in the door, because I was in college during Columbine, right? As soon as I became a Sioux Falls police officer, we know our role, we know our mission, especially when it comes to school safety or the worst case scenario of an active shooter incident. And to the person, we know what our role and responsibility is, and we know our response is measured in seconds, not minutes or not hours, right? And so we know what our job is, and so we're constantly communicating with the school, worked on some joint messaging that I hope people watched. You don't always know, you shoot a video, you don't always know if someone's gonna watch it like this one today, right? But I hope people watch it and see it and understand our commitment to that safety component.
Well, I just add a little bit to that. One of those recent incidences was at an elementary school where my grandchildren attend. And so I got pretty much a first-hand story from my daughter, and she knows the people, kids and the parents intimate, and they were more than satisfied with the response from the Sioux Falls Police Department in that system. But it really comes down to when one of those children is approached, they have to sound the alarm, and they have to be told what to do. They have to be trained what to do. And that, I'm glad the schools are doing that along the way to let kids know. Scary? Yes, when they have to learn that it's not just a perfect world that you thought it was when you were 5 years old, but those little kids need to know that along the way.
And we historically look back at Sioux Falls and my time as a police officer. We've had, these things are rare and few and far between. And there have been very few, if any, that I can remember of successful child abductions from a school, right? And part of that is we as a community have talked about it, but it's events like these which kind of reinvigorate the conversation, which are good in many ways, because it's a way for us to approach our kids, to approach adults. And you know what, in this day and age, when we're kind of afraid to offend people sometimes, well, I'd rather have you sound the alarm and then it end up being nothing than say nothing and then it ends up being something. And so let's just continue that as a community and really rally around our kids' safety, not only for this, but our kids' safety in a lot of other realms too, that we're making sure we protect them and keep them from what they don't need to be exposed to.
Sure. The other things we've heard about recently are the homeless task force. There's a homeless task force that has been created, and Councilor Sale, you sit on that task force. Do you want to talk a little bit about, what's happening there?
Sure. When Councilor McCarris was elected this last spring, one of his priorities was to do something with homeless. Long had I waited for somebody to, other councilors are there, but the passion that he brought to it really brought it for the forefront. So we created the homeless task force. The mayor had some appointments. I was able to make some appointment as the chair. So we have 13 people that sit on there. It's kind of a cross section. Some people are specialists and some people. We have a couple that have been homeless in the past that sit on there, bring a unique perspective. Right now we're in the listening phase, the learning phase. So we've had a few meetings to bring in some nonprofit organizations, and recently we had the city attorney and police department there to give us their thing. We are going to expand the time we have our meetings because you can't in 90 minutes get the information. There's so many more questions, there's so many more levels to it. So we're having some working sessions to try and get the information to the membership of this group to see what we can do. Where's the bottlenecks in the system? What else can we expand? We're going to include the state and the city or in the county as we go forward to do that too. We hope to have some recommendations later this year in 2022 to the city council, and I'm sure there'll be recommendations to the county and to the state and other things that we might be able to make some impact on. It's not a problem that's going to be taken care of instantly. There's no silver bullet, as you know, to the situation. But if we can make small steps towards getting it, the fear that there's out there is that we don't slip to become some of the other cities we've heard about where it's become such a problem in some areas. So we're taking a holistic approach to look at the big picture, what the players are and how we can do it. Hopefully we can get some traction by the end of this year.
Your officers are the ones who are first on the scene when there's a complaint about homelessness or loitering or trespassing. What are you seeing, and what are some of the solutions? What are some advice you can give to folks?
So historically, when problems don't have or when any defined person to deal with them, it falls to the police, right? And so we kind of do what is available to us either through enforcement or other methods. And I think what we're really seeing now more than ever is the addiction and mental health, the co-occurring disorders that really work together to really make this a difficult problem to deal with. Now that's not everybody that we're dealing with, but the ones that draw the most attention are usually struggling with these issues. And that's where this approach comes from, or we've been in this field for a while now, right? And we're in it every day. And so now, what are some action items that we can put together as a community? Because what we have is we have a lot of people, we're a generous community, and we support different missions, and we all go kind of separate paths on our mission. What I believe this task force has the ability to do is unify that mission. Let's pick out some goals that we can accomplish collectively, and if we all pull towards that goals, no matter what agency we're part of, we can make an impact and do different things. Because at the end of the day, we'll enforce the criminal complaints, but the reality is that, and we've seen it, sometimes they're in the door and they're out committing another violation before the paperwork's even done. So let's get to some of the core issues, and let's get there and look what's available either through programs or through ordinances or through statutes, or just the holistic approach of what we have to see how we can impact it. Because speaking to other counterparts throughout the country, like we have uncommon level of care for our community. Like we have resources that are there, we have shelters and food and everything that's there, but we need to really get to the point where we're now moving people to that next level, whether it's transitional housing or programs that really get people to where they can be housed and be successful and thrive. And I think that's our next step as a community.
Okay. There are lots of different ways that people can get involved, citizens can get involved, and that's through Neighborhood Watch, Coffee with the Cop, the Citizens Police Academy. Do we want to touch on some of these, or what's near and dear to your heart and your heart?
Well, I've been currently not a neighborhood watch captain, but I had been for many, many years. I got bumped out when we moved across the street. But we have a great neighborhood watch in my neighborhood. They have a Facebook page, and I think that's going to have to be one of the trends that takes a lot of traction in the future. We talk about see something, say something. If something's getting broke into my house, it might get broke into the next house, the next house. So we have a very active neighborhood watch in my area. I think we need to pay some more attention to that and bring more neighborhoods in.
Have you seen that, you know, it used to be, we talked about on this show many times, that people don't know their neighbors.
Yeah.
Do you think people are getting better about knowing their neighbors?
I was just going to bring that up because Kurt hit the nail on the head right here, right? They need to get better at knowing their neighbors, right? Because strength in the neighborhood comes from its community and how it works together. And if we're all looking out collectively for each other's interests, especially when it comes to crime, well, it may not be my house, but you know what? That's something I'm going to call in, or if something's happened over there, I'm going to call Crime Stoppers. But we have spots in town where I can think of one house in particular, there's probably many more, a repeated issue at this residence. Well, nobody's willing to say anything, like either cooperate with the police or do anything or say anything or be involved. Well, you know what? It's not surprising that things keep happening there, right? So really, how do we put this call out now more than ever? People want to know what they can do with some of the crime issues we're experiencing. Band together as neighborhoods, say you're not going to put up with it, get us involved. And once that neighborhood is known as a place where crime doesn't really necessarily have a home, it's either going to move on, right, to a neighborhood who's not taking those steps, or some change is going to happen. And I think that, on top of, I know I'll always hit the youth mentorship thing. I would rather that we invest in our youth, that they never get into the system or get into this life of crime. And that's the biggest thing we can do. And people like to throw money at stuff. Well, this is a thing that needs time. Like, we're gonna have to invest time in our youth to get to the point where we want to be. Money's good too. You can keep giving to all the funds you want to give to, right? But maybe what can I do to impact the life of a young person? And maybe that's the question we can all ask ourselves as a community.
Well, I think we could talk about these topics for a whole hour or maybe more, but we are out of time right now. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, has any questions, concerns, how do they get a hold of you?
My information's on the city website. Look under City Council, you'll see my picture. There it is.
All right, and that is siouxfalls.org. Thanks both of you for joining us for Inside Town Hall, and we will see you again next month.